Welcome, world. It is Monday, 6 p.m. on a Monday on the East Coast of the United States of America, which means it is time for Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. Malcolm, what's going on?
Monday.
Another Money Monday. What's going on, man? How you feeling?
Doing good, man. Not bad for a Monday, I guess.
Absolutely. Another great show. Of course, you're listening and watching Manage Your Damn Money, where we trade in bullet point personal finance advice for casual pop culturally relevant conversations about money. What's going on with you this week? Anything special?
So I worked out for the first time yesterday in probably a year at least.
Are you getting first time in a year?
At least. So I run.
Okay.
And I play basketball, but
Okay.
I don't lift any weights. So yesterday, for whatever reason, started out on leg day.
Okay.
And I'm barely sitting up right at this.
Leg day is never something you want to start with.
Tell me about it.
Are you getting ready for summer?
No,
We're inspired.
I was inspired. I was having a good weekend, I guess.
That's pretty hilarious. On Thursday, I'm going to Greece.
That sounds fun. Sounds expensive, too.
It's very expensive, and I actually want to make it clear that this is a very financially irresponsible trip for me.
Why? Who are you making that clear to? Why?
I'm just making it clear to the world, to our listeners, that this is not Ben's doing so amazingly he's going to Greece. This is a very financially irresponsible trip that I'm going on, but I'm going on it anyway because life is too short to be lived tentatively.
So you're like the doctor that binge eats French fries and has gout, but
Yes.
still gives out medical advice.
Really, actually, the thing that I never told you, Malcolm, is Manage Your Damn Money is really just a cathartic release for me, where I get to release all my anxieties and fears about money on a weekly basis. That's what this is. That's what you signed up for. So anyway, of course, we want to remind you that you're watching and listening to Manage Your Damn Money. And today's conversation at hand, we're talking about millennials starting a business and what it takes to make it in a crowded or capital intense industry. So really that means like what it takes to become an entrepreneur, especially in spaces where it takes a lot of money to sustain as an entrepreneur, or it has like really high cost of like startup cost. Those are the kinds of things that we're looking at today. We have a wonderful guest, a friend of the show and a friend of mine, Mr. Chris Coy. He's the president of Play It Coy Sports. He is a sports agent and recently became one of the youngest player representatives or sports agents to have at least 5 players in the NFL.
Which is saying a lot because the NFLPA is a bully. Like I can say that from like personal experience. The NFLPA is a bully as far as new entrants are concerned.
Okay.
So, like that's a bigger feat than it probably sounds like.
Absolutely. And the NFLPA is the people who manage who can be an agent and who cannot be an agent.
Right. Who can do business with their players at all.
Absolutely. But before we move on to the conversation at hand, we want to remind folks that as we do every week, the first thing we do is headlines.
Never gets old.
It never gets old. And the headline for this week, or the story we pulled for this week, the headline read, Millennials are increasingly looking for jobs in these mid-sized cities. This was a Fortune.com piece from September of 2016 by Kia Kokolicheva that reported that millennials are seeing less value in moving to major cities like New York, San Francisco. What would be like I guess maybe LA would be batched in there.
DC.
DC's kind of like it's becoming a big city.
You're
big
a
city.
hater.
The article reported on data from LinkedIn, which showed that millennials are showing a growing interest in moving to mid-sized cities. And they actually did this by like looking at how people, or how millennials specifically, are searching for jobs on the platform.
Right.
So like if you searched for a job in Austin, Texas, that was like how they figured out what the level of interest was. And the city's getting the biggest bump in job searches from millennials. Austin, Texas was the number one mid-sized city that was getting job search activity. And then after Austin, it was Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina area, which you're familiar with. And then also Detroit, Michigan, Cleveland, Akron, Ohio, and then Charlotte, North Carolina. Overall, millennials' interest in jobs in those cities has grown 25% over their interest in larger cities, according to LinkedIn.
Right.
And then actually, that's like people prospectively looking at jobs. The places where I understood it that people were actually moving to actually reside that are small to mid-sized cities was Seattle, Portland, and Denver.
No places I'd want to live. Nothing in that whole entire thing jumped out like.
Okay.
I mean, I'm selective, right? There's only like 3 or 4 places I'd consider moving to.
Right.
So I'm probably the worst example of If you guys who watch the show haven't figured it out, I'm the guy who hates like everything. Right? Like,
So, but why is it that like millennials are moving away from like so the biggest thing I have a big problem with, I'll start it with this, living in the city, right?
Right.
My buddy Nate, shout out to Nate, was talking about how when he moved to New York, he had that terrible song, Concrete Jungle Where Dreams Are Made Of, with Alicia Keys and Jay-Z.
Okay.
The New York, I guess it's called, right?
you don't like the song, I'm guessing.
It's not the song, it's the message behind the song. It's crap.
Why?
Because New York is high rent.
Okay.
It's
You knew that before you got there.
you knew that before you got there, but it presents this like real interesting picture of what it's like to live in New York, when actually it's a lot more difficult to actually make a way and make a living in New York City.
I think that's the whole point of the song, though.
I think it's like supposed to like be empowering. Like, yeah, you can make it in New York.
No, I think it's if you can make it in New York where it's terrible, then you can make it anywhere. Like that's what I got from it. Like I had breakfast with Jay-Z and he said, "No, I'm lying," but like that's the whole thing I got from the.
Well, then I clearly misinterpreted what the song was saying. But I feel like New York specifically, I don't think any other city. Only way I can say that about LA is because of traffic. But New York specifically is definitely overhyped. And I think that could be a reason why millennials are like, man, I'm not doing that. I'm about to go move over here in this place where I can pay $500 for rent per month.
I can't blame them. Like
Right.
You've heard me say in my frustrations how like looking for a place in DC, every time you look online, how home prices have gone up like $25,000. It makes you just say, forget it. I'm going to move to the suburbs. Now, I mean the suburbs of DC, like Maryland, Northern Virginia, somewhere, that kind of thing, not Akron, Ohio, or like some of these other places on the list. Austin, Texas will never see me as a resident.
These places, I'm sure, are fine places to live and raise a family.
I'll let you tell me about it. I have a running tally of all the places you could never pay me enough money to move to, and Texas is on that list.
You have a running tab of these
Mississippi,
places.
South Carolina, like I'm how much
Let's
time
just
you
go ahead and disrespect the rest of the United States of America. Okay, who else on your list?
Alabama, Georgia, like all these are places that like I don't care who I work for and how much they tell me we'd love you to go work for our location in one of these places. It's not happening.
Right.
So I mean, I get it. It probably is more sensible when you look at it dollars and cents wise to
Right.
say I'm going to go move to a place where my dollar goes a little further, like Raleigh, Durham, like you said, and that kind of stuff.
Right.
But then again, you also have to consider what quality of life are you going to have living in these places before you go to them.
Absolutely.
Are people going to be willing to come visit you in Jackson, Mississippi? Are people going to be willing to come visit you in Akron, Ohio?
Right.
Is LeBron retiring and moving to Akron and going, then maybe I'll come visit you, like to come to his basketball camp. But otherwise, like, what are you getting in exchange for this lower cost of living?
Right, absolutely. That's definitely a consideration. Do you think companies, because I know specifically North Carolina, a lot of companies, like big companies, have talked about moving headquarters to North Carolina.
Right.
Which is another one of those up and coming kind of mid-sized cities. Do you think
I think it's kind of up by now, like Charlotte specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting is you're naming like all the different cities, the major hubs of whatever they are.
Uh-huh.
They're different hubs for different industries. So like Charlotte has become like its own de facto Wall Street in the sense that large banks have moved down there for cheap rent and cheap labor.
Right.
But now, because so many people have moved there, wages are actually fairly competitive in those places. Like you'd look at a salary for a job in DC for a company and then look at that same job in Charlotte.
it's about the same?
It's almost the same thing.
Right.
It's
Okay.
not quite New York money, but it's almost the same thing as what it would be to live in Charlotte.
Do you think how much of it too, as pertains to millennials, and before we go to a quick break, how much do you think it's millennials kind of shunning the typical, or I suppose I know I got the message that like you go get a degree and then you move to a bigger-ish city to get the bigger-ish paying salary. Is it that millennials are kind of moving away from the idea that you have to live in a big city to make a good living?
Well, I think we're moving away from the fact that you need to live in a big city to be able to physically go to work every day.
Oh, wow.
So I can live in the suburbs or live in a little bit more quote unquote remote part of town,
Right.
because I work from anywhere.
Right.
Everywhere has a Starbucks. I can open my laptop and be at work, and it doesn't matter what city you're in. So
Absolutely.
if it's Austin, Texas, or Seattle or whatever,
Right.
it's equally as good as being in New York City or DC or San Francisco or whatever else. Because remotely, who cares?
Right. Teleworking it's definitely impacting the way that we do business and whatnot. But we're going to take a real quick break. We want to remind folks that you're listening and watching Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. And today's conversation at hand, we're talking about millennials starting a business and how to make it in capital-intense industries. Pretty soon, later on the show, we're going to be talking to our guest, Mr. Chris Coy, who is the president of Play It Coy Sports. He's a sports agent, and we're going to talk to him about how he has kind of made it in a space that's really tough to break into. And we're going to talk through some of the things that typically happen for you in order for someone to be successful in that way. So we're going to take a real quick break. You're listening, watching Manage Your Damn Money. We will be right back.
Ladies and gentlemen, Willie Beeman has done it again.
We are back here on Manage Your Damn Money with myself, Ben, and my co-host, Malcolm. Another wonderful day to be talking about money. And in this particular episode, we're covering kind of a difficult topic to explain, I guess, relatively speaking. No?
I don't think so.
Okay, so we're talking about how to break into really tough industries, especially industries that cost a lot of money. I think it's one thing if you're a business owner and you have if you paint, or if you're like a singer and you make music. Those are things that are, you buy your equipment and things you need and you're pretty much done. But there's also questions about what if the businesses that you want to get into requires a lot of money to get into it.
Right. So it's tough to break into, and it's tough to find your first customer, your
Absolutely.
first client. Because the people you're competing against have multi-billion-dollar budgets.
Right.
And they can spend whatever it takes to make sure that, they don't see any competition.
Absolutely, absolutely. So entrepreneurship on many levels has become a buzzword for millennials and the millennial generation. Literally everyone has a side hustle, creative endeavor, or something that they are creating and hopefully selling to someone. But beyond the cosmetic trends of Instagram entrepreneurship, which we've talked about often, what are the numbers saying about millennials and how millennials go about starting businesses? What does it take to get started? What's driving the attitudes millennials have towards starting a business or side hustle? And what are the tried and true strategies to breaking through in tough or established industries? And in preparing for this piece, we looked at a story from February 2016 titled Millennialpreneurs. So they kind of mix two different words there.
People love coming up with catchy phrases for millennial generation.
Right.
Anytime I see a story that starts with millennial, I just go skip.
Right.
It's going to be terrible.
So this was millennialpreneurs are starting more businesses and targeting higher profits. Again, this was a February 2016 story from Fortune.com by Molly Petrilla, which explored BNP Paribas Global Entrepreneur Report, which found millennials are outpacing the previous generation and how and when they start to look to start their business.
Right.
So the article actually reported on a survey findings from 2,600 quote unquote high and ultra high net worth individuals from 18 countries that suggest 20 to 35-year-olds are starting more companies, managing bigger staff, and targeting higher profits than their baby boomer predecessors.
Right. Score one from millennials.
Another one from millennials. So according to the findings, millennials are discovering entrepreneurship significantly earlier than boomers did. While the older generation launched their first business at roughly 35 years old, so-called millennialpreneurs are setting out around 27. I feel like that's definitely on point with what I've seen just in my life.
Yeah, 27 seems even kind of late to me.
Right.
It seems to me like you meet folks who are 23, 24, graduate from college, spend a year looking for a job,
right.
and they go, I got it. I'll start my own.
Right. Absolutely. And definitely the fact that we have like the technology,
I think that's the biggest
thing. Like you can like go on one of those I'm thinking about LegalZoom. You can do the different mechanisms of starting a business kind of relatively easily now, whereas before it was probably a huge process. You had to like hire a lawyer back before the internet was really a thing like it is now.
Well, not only that, think about how you used to have office space.
Oh, yeah.
For people to take you seriously. Now you can have somebody come meet you at a shared co-working space,
Right.
and they think you're the coolest thing in the world. Like, you know what I mean? Or you
It's
can
legit.
have somebody come meet you at a coffee shop for a
Right.
business meeting, and
Right.
they think, it's just the normal. So think about how much that brings your overhead down. And not have
Absolutely.
to spend $3,000-$4,000 a month on rent
Right.
out the gate. So then that helps tremendously.
It's definitely a lower bar to entry in terms of starting a business of some kind. This report also found that millennials have started twice as many companies as boomers. And as we mentioned, a lot of that has to do with the low bar of entry due to technology and services, as well as, this was interesting, a greater openness to failure.
Okay.
So millennials are actually not as hesitant about failing as the boomer generation was.
Right. Because if you're not failing, you're not trying.
If you're not failing, you're not trying. Do you think it's like why do you think that is? That and the story actually went on to say that baby boomers see or used to see failure as a stop in the career, whereas millennials don't view business failure as career failure or career inhibiting. Some might say it's even career enriching to have like gone through some kind of entrepreneurial process and not been totally successful.
You learn a lot. I mean, so as somebody who hasn't had a salary job in my entire adult life, like you learn a lot more, I think, when you have to figure it out on the cut of a dime.
Right.
That you normally would have a little bit more cushion and a little bit more time to kind of figure it out.
Right.
If you had, that salary behind you. But then also, like, I can speak for myself. My perspective is that salary job / normal will
Right.
always be there.
Right.
Like it's always going to be right there around the corner when you want to go find it. Right.
Right.
So why not take a shot or 2 or 3 or 5? Like Mark Cuban brags about the fact that he was fired from 7 jobs before he started his own company. Like,
Right.
And then his first startup failed.
Right.
And now the guy's one of the richest people in the world and owns a basketball team. So,
Right.
like,
If
there's
that first-
something to be said for that.
Right. If at first you don't succeed, try again. Interesting thought. I wonder about this though sometimes when it comes to like the previous generation and the millennial generation. The difference between how millennials see entrepreneurship a lot of times. We talk about people who have like Instagram hustles and whatnot, but and I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I mean it in the sense of they can actually do something that brings them money on the side
Right.
via Instagram and social media platforms and still work a full-time job.
Right.
And it's a lot more fluid whether you're like full-time employee or if you're a side hustler on the weekends. Like it's kind of, Risa Renee talked about this, like having different jobs and whatnot. Whereas the previous generation, it was just like you did one thing,
Right.
and that was it. So it's like, what does that say about our process or thought process that it's kind of fluid, going back and forth between like regular jobs and like being an entrepreneur?
Think about how you grew up spending your free time as a kid versus how I'm going to assume your dad and your mom did.
Okay, lay that
So,
out for me.
On a Saturday morning, when you were a kid and you got up and you watched cartoons and ate your cereal,
Right.
you were just watching cartoons at that time, right?
Right.
You fast forward 10 years, those kids are watching cartoons, eating their cereal, Snapchatting with their friends, sending emails to who God knows who, buying stuff on their parents' iPad from Amazon and everything else.
Right.
And you're interacting with 7 things simultaneously.
Right.
And like keeping all of that flowing. So that kind of translates into your skills as an adult
Right.
when it comes to managing 3 or 4 different business ventures all at the same time, because you're used to multitasking and keeping all these different things up in the air at the same time
Right.
from the time you're like 6.
Right.
So I think that's good training. Like a lot of
Yeah.
times people complain about the fact that kids' attention is not easy to bring into like
Right.
one thing.
Right.
But it's good training for being able to run 3 companies simultaneously.
So actually, condescending baby boomers, we are well trained in the art of managing multiple tasks, and that's why we have so many different things going on. That's an interesting take on it. And we actually looked up a different story to kind of get at the heart of that idea of upending or getting into a space that's really difficult to get into. The story that we pulled was millennials upend traditional Madison Avenue advertising practices. One of the biggest challenges, as we know, to starting and sustaining any kind of business is breaking through, keeping and growing your customer base. But how do you do this for more traditional industries with established and well-funded players? So we looked at this 2016 article by Jack Lochner, which looked at how millennials' digital consumption trends, to your point, are upending how big companies and ad agencies reach audiences.
Right.
And the study reported a survey of 500 U.S.-based small and medium-sized businesses about their digital mobile marketing strategies and tactics. And the survey found that millennials spend 58% of their marketing budget on digital media. So these are like millennials who are in control of budgets, while baby boomers only spend 14% of their marketing budget on digital media, making millennials 3 times more likely than baby boomers to spend the majority of their media budget on digital advertising.
So we're going straight to the source.
We're going straight to the source. Absolutely. Straight to the, it's no like back end or like, what am I saying?
Well, so here's what's interesting though. It's millennial created platforms that are allowing more millennials to get to these customers easily. Like Facebook was created by a millennial.
Absolutely.
Snapchat, Instagram, all those other pieces
Absolutely.
were created by millennials for millennials who are now leveraging those platforms to be able to do business better.
And that's the primary way that people, especially now, understand of how to get into any kind of business at all, is you have to have your digital presence.
You have to, or you don't exist.
Or you don't exist. Like, and you know, it's another interesting trend. There's this particular guy on Instagram and all the like social media platforms. He does like this magic editing stuff. His name is Zach King. And Zach King does not have a website.
Okay.
He has a YouTube, he has an Instagram, he has everything else you can have social media wise. He does not have a website. Like when you type in his name, there's no website that pops up. And I know that baby boomers would be like, "Oh my gosh, well that's just terrible."
You know what? I'm kind of a hybrid. The old man in me would be like, I can't trust this guy. He doesn't have a website. You don't have a website? Who doesn't have a website?
Who doesn't have a website? Right.
So I think you need both, personally. Because then you alienate an entire group of people who would be your customers that are used to coming and finding your website to find out about you.
That's true.
There's
That's
some
true.
links to your YouTube videos or your Instagram page, but let me choose how I come find you.
Malcolm's such an old man. Of course, we want to remind folks that you are listening and watching Manage Your Damn Money. We also want to let you guys know that you can watch us on TV now. If you're in the Washington, D.C. area, you can catch us on
Monday nights at 10.
Mondays at 10 on Montgomery Community Media, and that's in the local D.C. area, Channel 21, I believe. And then you can also listen to old episodes of Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm on iTunes or on SoundCloud. Simply search Manage Your Damn Money. But we're going to take a real quick break in a moment. But again, to frame up the conversation for our guest, Chris Coy, sports agent, we're talking about how millennials are kind of upending really in industries that are really tough to get into.
Right, because we talk all the time about folks who can jump into an industry like media, for example. Everybody's got a social media manager of some sort, and that job is almost created specifically for a millennial. But then if you think about folks that work in more traditional worlds like accounting or finance or legal or those kind of things, those are really hard to start your own shop, especially right out the gate.
I was gonna say that's a good list. Are there any others you can think of off the top of your head that
I just
are like?
gave you like 5.
I'm trying to think of some. I can't think of any.
Now
that was good though.
Now you're trying to make me think about it.
No, I'm sorry. That was a real good. That was a real good list though. But we're gonna take a really quick break. But when we come back, we'll have Chris Coy on, president and principal sports agent at Play It Coy Sports Agency, and we'll talk to him about how he got into doing the business that he's in. The NFL draft is coming up. It's on Thursday, so we'll talk a little bit about that, and then also how he's been able to maintain his business over the years and grow it, and how he's been successful. So stay tuned. You're listening, watching Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back. We are back here on Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, and we are joined in the middle by Mr. Chris Coy. Chris Coy is a sports agent based in the Washington, D.C. / maybe Atlanta area. And you're an NFL sports agent.
Yes, that is true.
That is true, huh?
Yes, that is true.
Absolutely. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
What is it, a trial?
I don't know. It sounds like it.
Listen, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing well, man. Doing well. You excited that the draft is coming up, the NFL draft. You're an NFL agent specifically right now, right?
Yes.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about Play It Coy and your sports agency and what you do.
So I'm a sports agent. I started my agency in 2012. So we've been on operation for about 5 years. We have 6 clients in the NFL, and then we have a draft class of about 5 guys coming up this upcoming year. And we're just kind of just getting started in the business. I identify that I want to be a sports agent at a very early age. So I tell people all the time I got a 15-year head start because I identify that I want to be a sports agent at 14. So I was able to position myself and put myself around the right people and shake the right hands, and here I am today.
How'd you come across the idea that you want to be a sports agent at, what was it, 14?
Yes. So what happened was, up until that point, I wanted to be Deion Sanders.
Oh, right.
I'm not too coordinated, as most of my friends would tell you, a.k.a. you. So needless to say, the idea of being a professional athlete went out the window at a very early age. I went into high school like 4'11". I think I was like 96 pounds, soaking wet. So needless, the idea of me being a football player had a harsh reality at my first practice. When everyone else was a lot bigger than me, it was just like, I had to find a way to still tickle my fancy of, being around the business side, or I guess the NFL, I guess.
Okay.
I don't know. We had a player, as you know, on the show a few shows back, and Ben told us that he could have been in the NFL and made some tackles. So,
Honestly, I've seen a couple players in person. I'm like, you playing NFL? Like, size-wise. Now, granted,
True,
I'm
size.
a lot smaller than even the smallest NFL players.
This is true. However, I actually have a client this year that I'm bigger than in terms of
I think I saw a picture of that.
Yes, he's about 5'10", or probably about 5'9", but he's lightning fast.
Okay.
Listen, I was uncoordinated and small. If you're gonna be small, you got to at least be coordinated and fast and that kind of stuff. So that's the aspect of it. That's
Okay.
the issue.
I think that the main thing that we talked about before was that tackling was just the major problem for me.
Oh yeah. You were like Deion Sanders. You probably just didn't tackle.
Yeah, it was like my thing. Like, I don't tackle, and everybody knew it.
I play football in LA.
Two hand touch.
Absolutely. So getting back on focus a little bit, talk about the steps that you took, and maybe a little bit earlier on in your career, because you were a sports agent, but you also did some other things, and how those two things intertwined to become what eventually became your sports agent, Play It Coy Sports.
Okay, I come from a religious background, so the idea of me, I had a goal and I had a dream, and this was my dream. And my life, the steps that I've taken up to this point have led me into my ultimate goal. So I guess coming out of high school, I went to Shaw University and ended up transferring to Hampton for the purposes of I wanted to be in a sports management major, and I could be around, sports management per se. While I was there, 3 or 4 guys got drafted. And what helped me with that is I was able to help them through their process, meet different agents, and learn the process from there, and then also intern for an agent at the same time. So while that was all going on, I was learning a lot through that. And then I went and realized that you had to have a post-secondary degree in order to be an agent. So I decided to go to Georgetown. And while I was at Georgetown, there was a lockout. And while there was a lockout, they weren't certifying any new agents. So as a result, I ended up going and working in banking because I found out that 78% of athletes are broke, unemployed, have financial duress after their careers are over. So I figured if I could learn about, I guess, banking and finance, it would, kind of go hand in hand with the sports agent side of it. And, it all came together in that sense. In that particular one bank, it's called PNC Bank, I met my business partner, my first client, and my athlete advisor. So that to me is not just, anything that I did particularly. It's the man upstairs leading me to the right direction.
Absolutely.
So one thing that I heard you say in that whole process is that you were deliberate in everything that you did leading up to where you are now.
Absolutely.
So
sure.
I think that has a little bit that needs to be repeated, just because we talk about, like, for the fact that students going from high school to college right now are thinking about what they want to major in, and then we think about the burden of student loan debt and how it kind of kills you when you can't figure out what you want to do coming out of school and blah, blah, blah. But one way I think that you just made me think about that helps to alleviate some of that or completely get it out of there is knowing exactly why you're going to school. knowing exactly what it is that you want to do. And I don't mean necessarily you know exactly what company you want to work for. If you know exactly who you're going to sign as your first client, which we'll get into in a second. But more so just you have a plan every day when you get up out of the bed that you know what you're driving toward. Absolutely. So I think that's a very important point from what you just said to make sure that we kind of reiterate with our viewers. But on that point, can you talk about a little bit getting started as, you know, a newbie in the industry, a very young guy in the industry? How do you build credibility? How do you go find your first customer?
So like I said, while working in that bank, I was able to identify. So I worked in a wealthy area. I worked in a wealthy banking area, and I got to realize that this is a very expensive business. As far as an agent is concerned, you're investing typically $30,000 to $50,000 into each player.
Wow.
Before you even see any type of investment, before you see any type of return. So with that being said, it's a very capital-driven business. So with me, you know, like you were talking about student loans, and that's why I laughed and looked at Ben, because, you know, me, coming out of undergrad, I had a decent amount of student loans, and I was never afraid of taking out the extra loan to do what I need to do, because to me, I always knew that in my heart I was going to be a sports agent. There was nothing,
be willing to bet on yourself.
There was nothing that could ever tell me. I had professors and teachers and tell me all them types of stuff. You know, there's so many different reasons. You know, so many agents are out there that don't have any clients, but for me, I had a direct focus on I absolutely wanted to be a sports agent. So it didn't matter for me what I had to go through in order to get there. But back to what I was saying, while working in that banking, I met different people, and I would tell everyone that I wanted to be a sports agent because this is a networking, you know, knowing the right people. So I would literally tell everyone from the trash man to the lady that came in and deposited $600,000 into her bank,
Right.
And basically, you know, I would tell everyone. And I told one guy who happened to be the cousin of a professor at my university, and he ended up taking me to lunch, and he ended up becoming a financial advisor, or that's what his thought process was, that he was going to be a financial advisor for my clients. And, you know, and he liked me, and then he introduced me to this person, that person, and that's how they became my board of advisors. And he invested into my agency, and then we kind of went on from there. And, you know, we went on and kind of, yeah, I guess that's how we got started. And then while working in that same bank, I met the mother of a kid who had just got kicked out of school. And I met him and got a chance to see him and talk to him. And I could see that there was something raging inside of him. He just needed a little bit of direction. Yeah. So I helped him and mentored him to getting to where he was at to get transferred. And he became my first client.
Good for you, man.
So I literally walked him through. So he got kicked out of the University of Maryland, then transferred to the University of Delaware, then ended up being my first client who went to the Combine, who we just did a multi-year deal for with the Broncos. So it's literally all throughout that bank. So me and Karaya Salz, the manager of that bank, she's been my biggest supporter in addition to my parents, because there's a lot to go on. Because while doing my business, I had, you know, my other side business.
Right. So you talked a little bit about the process and how the start of the business. Talk to me about a little bit specifically about what it took to break through in, like you said, an industry that, you know, you just told us how you got client number one. Just what did it take to break through in an industry that's really tough to get into? One, because it's very expensive.
Yeah.
Number two, it's cost intensive to actually keep and maintain clients and to get clients across that finish line of actually signing an NFL contract. So what are some key things, like top level things, that you felt like helped you guys break through?
I think persistence. I think the idea is that, like I talked to you earlier about this, like you're investing in players, not to bring it back to the financial, but it is a financial show, to kind of compare it to a mutual fund. That first year, Zach wasn't our only client. We had 5 guys that particular year. 3 of the guys actually made it to the NFL. 2 are still in the NFL until this day. So it took a lot of trial and error. So I had to try multiple places or multiple people to, you know, be able to get the necessary clients that actually stick in the NFL. Like he mentioned that he went to a school that produced a lot of NFL talent. But how many guys stayed in and got second contracts and are still in it up at this point? Right. So realistically, it was, for me, the biggest thing was to kind of not put all my eggs in one basket when it came to client-wise, if that makes sense.
Okay. So you recently found out that you're one of the youngest NFL agents to have at least 5. You have 6 active players now who are signed to current contracts.
Yes. And that's before the draft. So after the draft, I was drafted. Right on.
After the draft, you should be 25.
Listen.
I'm on your side, man.
Right. No, I mean, I the goal is to get there, but I mean, right now it's after the draft. We should have 5 guys going in this year, so we should have about 11, 12 guys in the league.
So you talked about persistence. What's 2 other things that you feel like people need to bring to the table when they're trying to break through in a really tough industry?
I think to a certain extent, I'm like, people always talk about me personally, and I'm ADD, right? I'm all over the place in that sense. But in a lot of ways, that has helped me, because there are going to be people that are out there that have told you what you can't do, or you can't do this because of that, or whatever the case may be. I'm ADD to that, so I don't really listen to them, and I stay focused. I've always been a very driven person when it came to my career.
Right.
Like my friends will tell you in other aspects of life, maybe not, but my career, I've always been very focused on being a sports agent. So I think determination is a big thing, and I think identifying mentors and other people that have kind of, not necessarily mentors, but other people that have been successful in that agency. Like, I read all the Drew Rosenhaus books. I read about everything that said agent on it. I mean, all the agents on it in general, just learning from different people to kind of get to where you're at.
Right.
So it's interesting that you brought up Drew Rosenhaus, because the first time you and I met, that's something I thought about.
Who is Drew Rosenhaus,
So Drew
first of all?
Rosenhaus is one of the more popular sports agents in the NFL. He's repped some really big names.
For sure.
But the reason I keep talking about him is because he kind of had the same model as what you're talking about. He's a guy who identified very early on that he was not the athlete. He was not going to be anybody's number 1 draft pick, number 2, round 6, He wasn't even going to be Mr. Irrelevant.
Right.
So he looked at that and said, I'm going to make sure that I surround myself with the guys who will be in those first round, second round, third round drafts. And I'm going to make sure that I befriend them as early on as I possibly can, let them know what my vision is for my life, and get them to buy in as soon as I possibly can. So he went to University of Miami. We all know a lot of football talent came out of the University of Miami in the 80s. And he has had some very big, prominent folks along the way. So it sounds like I said, and being deliberate, you've done a pretty good job of that yourself. But another piece is the networking.
Absolutely.
So you built your network a long time down the road before you needed it. How important is networking to you now, from the standpoint of you being in business, being a little more established? How has your approach changed?
So my networking aspect of it, now I know that I'm able to identify talent. I can identify it from my point of view. Like, I can look at a player and see his highlight tape and think, hey, this kid can play. Now I have relationships with general managers and scouts that can confirm that this kid can play, or where he's ranked and where you think his upside is. Right. So this past year, all the clients I signed this past year, I sent all of them to get a scouting report from a guy who's an assistant general manager who's in between jobs right now. Right. So just having those relationships and networking and kind of putting myself out there and going to different events and rubbing shoulders with the right people in a very interesting industry, because like I told someone before, as far as this business is concerned, there are a lot of grown men that hate on you in a sense, because it's like you're kind of coming in as a new guy who has a relationship that's a little bit more genuine with the players, because you can identify them on a more personal basis. So it's very interesting. Like last year, I was at the Senior Bowl with a couple of my clients, and it was like grown men, like from like grown black men, like scowling at me from a way. It was weird. It was the most weird conversation, because you would think they would help me, but to a certain extent, I understand, because just like I'm the young kid who can kind of come after you in a sense, and it was just weird to me. So from that standpoint, I think networking is very much so key. But identifying, who the people are that are the decision makers for your particular business, and the sports agent business is a lot different than a lot of other side of business. Right.
Talk to me about, go back a little bit in the story, like initially after you started Play It Coy, the sports agency. How, because I know your story in terms of how you moved back and forth between the banking industry and being a sports agent. You're a sports agent at literally the same time
as
banking.
For sure.
Talk to me about how the fluid nature of your entrepreneurial efforts between working full time and then also working as a sports agent independently, and how you've gone back and forth between those things, and why it was important to be able to do that.
Me personally, my only work was while I was working at the bank. Being a sports agent to me really isn't a job. For me personally, I've always been passionate about this. This is my living a dream. I tell people all the time. So I try to help my clients identify what they would do for free, because they've got a head start in life. The NFL, it stands for not for long. You have a very small window that can help you make as much money as possible, but build as many connections as possible. So for me, I found something that I'm truly passionate about. So it was never really a time where it was like, oh, well, I got to work this job and then still drive to Delaware to see Zach play, or go to William & Mary and see Jerome play. It was more of, I got to get out of this job so I can get there on time, because I've always wanted to do that. So it's been an innate drive in me that I've just continued to focus on, and in that sense, I just kind of push towards it. And like he talked about, or you think you brought up Mark Cuban being Being fired from, listen, I've been fired from a couple banks, but I continued to keep relationships at the ones that I needed to. Right. But I had to, because there were times where I was at a football game or one of my clients wanted me to stay a little bit longer, and I had to be to work the next Monday, and I had to make a decision, so I called in sick. Right. But at that point in time, I identified that, I was hoping that my agency would work out, and it absolutely did in that sense.
Talk to me a little bit specifically about the importance in your mind of having worked those jobs and the way that it's contributed to the success of your business currently.
So that idea of me going to work in banking taught me a lot about financial education. Financial education is typically taught through your 20s, through trial and error.
Right.
And athletes have that same problem, trial and error. They're messing up hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. For me, working at those jobs, I learned about personal finances from working in banking, but also working those jobs made my drive. So like now that I have an investor, and not that I didn't have an investor before, but now I'm a full investor, my drive to not go back to the bank, because that's the fear. The fear is the agency doesn't work. What experience do you got? You can go back to selling bank. You can go back to the bank, and not to applaud somebody that works at a bank, or not go against someone that works at a bank, but I don't want to go back to the bank. Right. So if anything, it brought fire to me than it did anything negatively.
Okay.
So last question.
I know you work in bank.
Last question I have before we kick you off the stage for insulting my industry. You mentioned you started down the road a little bit talking about what I would call your unique selling proposition, which I think you absolutely have to have if you're going to be kind of the guy on the outside that's trying to take on the Goliath, if you will.
For sure.
So you were talking for a second about the fact that you focus from day one on what your guys are going to do after they're no longer in the league.
For sure.
Can you talk a little bit about like how having that unique selling proposition of life after sports has helped you land, that one key client, or helped you, to kick down a door a little bit that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to get into?
I mean, that's always been our thought process. Play It Coy is actually a DBA. Our company is called Life After Sports, doing business as Play It Coy Sports. So for us, it's always been about the essential life after aspect of it. So for me, that's what I go in talking about. So I think identifying that I care about you as an individual, not as a football player.
Right.
What you can make me from a revenue standpoint is second to my mentorship of a young man that I can have and happen to impact his life in that direction. So for me, at the end of the day, if you want to break down what it is I like about the agency business, it's not about negotiating contracts, not about standing on fields, watching football. Football's cool. I love that. That's second. But where the core is I like the mentorship of the young men that I can impact their lives, that they can go on and impact other people's lives. So for me, it's always been a life after, and I know that a lot of them just struggle from different things, from lack of finances, lack of job opportunities. So for me, able to kind of channel what I'm passionate about, mentoring and helping them and giving them directions and pointing them in the right direction. For me, that was always important to me as an agent.
Okay, and real quick, if someone's exploring entrepreneurship or a side hustle in a space that's really capital intensive, like we talked about, like sports agency is, like starting a legal firm might be, or other industries that are really tough to break into with your own thing, what would be like some key things that you think are important that person do to really start taking steps towards breaking through in that industry, that whatever it might be?
I think that, so for me personally, as an agent, the thing is you pay for the player. You pay for his training, housing, that kind of stuff. That's the cost side of it.
Right.
But if you have the relationship with the player, I know agents that have taken players to agencies and said, listen, I have the relationship, you have the money.
Right.
You have to kind of be creative in that sense. So it's the what do you have? What do you bring to the table? So you don't have the money, but you can relate to this player. You can trust his mom. You can get his mom to trust you. And then a lot of times you kind of don't necessarily have much leverage with the agency because they have the money, and at the end of the day, money a lot of times helps agency wise.
Right.
But I think if you can kind of just be creative with different ways to kind of get behind the money. I mean, there's different type of I think there's like different ways on the internet you can raise money, and family and friends.
Right.
And then kind of identifying at a very early, or not a very early age, but what your goal is and what you're passionate about. And I think that a lot of people, when you talk to people about what they want to do, they're all over the place.
Right.
And I want to be a sports agent and nothing else.
Right.
So
absolutely. So focus and making sure that you're creative about how you're doing the business side. That's excellent stuff. Where can people learn more about Chris Coy and his work?
You can go to my website, playcoy.com. I'm one of the cool people that do have websites. my investors is a nice guy. But needless to say, you can also check me out on Instagram. I guess that's kind of corny. But I mean,
What's your handle? What's your corny handle?
C_COY.
C_COY.
I've
Okay,
never
very
met
good.
anybody that was too cool for Instagram.
No,
That
it's
is
not.
a
But I
new
just
one for
think
me.
that it's like, hey, check me out on those websites and stuff. Like that's just not me. I'm not that guy. That's just not who I am. I typically build my relationships through networking, not necessarily through use on my Instagram page.
Very good, very good. On that note, we are going to go to a really quick break, but we want to remind you that you're listening, watching Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. We want to thank Mr. Chris Coy, sports agent.
No problem.
Good luck with the draft and whatnot,
Thank you very much.
and we will be right back.
All right, sounds good.
That girl there got her bubble. Walking through the city ain't nothing but trouble. That girl, that girl, that girl, that girl, that girl there got her bubble. Walking through the city ain't nothing but trouble. That girl, that girl, that girl, that girl, that girl.
Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. Another really information-packed episode.
Yeah, that was all good stuff, and I'm excited about the draft on Thursday myself. So that was kind of just like a primer.
Are you planning on watching the NFL draft?
I will at least watch the first round,
Okay.
like the rest of America, and then if I don't have anything to do on Friday, I might check out some of the rest of it.
It'll be on in the background as you vacuum.
Basically, yeah, you're giving me a lot of credit assuming I vacuum, but yes, I will spend Friday and not Saturday because that's when you get too deep into it to make any sense. But I hope my Cowboys do the right thing. This offseason, they've had a really good draft class the last couple of years, and
Okay.
so I'm excited.
Okay. Malcolm's excited about the NFL draft. Very good. Well, we want to remind folks how they can watch and listen Manage Your Damn Money. You can always catch us here on listenvisionlive.com on Mondays at 6 p.m. And then you can catch us on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/Manage Your Damn Money. And you could also find us on iTunes. You can
Yes.
listen to any old episodes that are awesome and wonderful and ready for your listening pleasure at any time. Just search Manage Your Damn Money on the iTunes podcast platform. I think they just changed the name to Apple Podcast, interestingly enough.
That's fine. The icon on the app is the same.
It's the same, so it doesn't really mean much to us.
And you can send in your questions, comments, concerns, kudos to info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. Don't bother sending us your negative criticisms because I'm just going to report it as spam.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you need any other information from us, you can always visit us at manageyourdamnmoney.com. And remind you that you can follow us in corny fashion on Instagram and Twitter at MYDM1.
At Malcolm on Money.
Excellent, excellent. And until next time, we'll see you later. And until then, be good with your money.
Peace.
Peace.